there were some elements probably in the film which connected to the previous session's discussion. So if anybody would like to, just respond to that, please.
So I basically did not face direct and the direct effects of environmental decline until I moved out of there, because people are still so in touch with nature, and every bird that comes onto our balcony, or every bird that one of the dozens of birds that live in the tree behind my room, or the rare birds even lay eggs like right in front of our kitchen, and that is such a common occurrence to me. So I think that feeling of keeping it our little secret, or any of those are pets of our own, and that and juxtaposition I faced when I moved here. So I even interned at People for Animals, and when I interned there, you will not believe the amount of people that think they can trap wild animals as pets. They and it's not even like monkeys or anything of that sort. It's genuine deer, gazelle. They've trapped them in cages and kept them inside their urban space, thinking they ought to be their pets. So I sort of love that detail, that she's so in touch with nature, and she's considering them beings of their own. They have their own individuality, and at the same time, they're also observable by her and close to her, and like pets, but without disturbing them. They're in their own space, yet they're with you, and I think that's a lovely thought.
Anyone else?
So one of the key details I liked about the movie, I was a documentary, it was that showing about the day-to-day life of a rural family, of the tribals, is very difficult as a documentary maker. And if we keep an urban family in that situation, they would be very fearful of their children. That what if the leopard attacks them, or what if the nature, like any wild animal, attacks them? But where the difference was seen, the tribal family, they were very coexisting with the leopard. They were considering him as a family, a part of it, wherein they were showing how humans and animals can coexist together. It's just that a support is required from the humans as well. So if a hand is given, surely the animals would surely contribute as well. So that's the key element which director has done a great work in that.
Yeah.
This is a question that I got when we were discussing during the previous lot. So we humans have a problem with cutting forest for metro stations and everything, but we tend to complain about the traffic and everything, and when government takes they take decisions to reduce the traffic, like making the metro station, they have to cut the trees for that. So then we have a problem with cutting the trees. So what should the government take a stand on this? They're also humans, they have to take a stand.
The dilemmas are the problems, because the government's role is to deal with multiple pressures, right? There are pressures for, the dilemmas are many, because the government's welfarist agenda is quite vast. The government has to cater to the poor, as well as to make sense of the lobbies, builder lobbies that are acting on it. So how does the government reconcile all of these requirements? And the government is a very huge entity as well. It's not a monolith, it's heterogeneous. But it's very difficult. The three films were very powerful, very strong messages. I just want to open up the questions again to you. That what is the core message you heard in all the three? It's very clear, right? The message. What is the core message that you heard? Yes, please. Someone at the back. You wanted to say something?
I think the core message would be, if you take animals home, they will make your home as their home. And they will surely make it. If you, or we may see more deaths incoming, because if you disrupt animals' habitat, it will be very difficult for humans as well in future. In long term, it can cause many problems to the ecology as well.
Thank you. Any further thoughts on who the you is? Who is this you? If you take away our habitation, then who is the you here? Any other thoughts? Open up the question of you. Who is you?
I just like to put it out there how beautifully the tribes have learned how to coexist and live with the leopard over there, which is a beautiful sight. Actually, humans are very greedy at the end of the day, and when you see stuff like this, there's still hope in humanity, and you still know there are good people around. So that's like one key takeaway from this.
So again, I'll just thanks. absolutely, that is the core message as well. There are core messages of human beings taking over natural habitation, natural environments, and at the same time, the message is to coexist with, but not to disrupt the natural environment, and to coexist with them. But I'm going to come back to my question on who is this humans and who is this you we are talking about. Yes,
Yeah,
please.
go ahead. I think I'll start with answering the previous question that you asked. So for me, one of the core messages that keeps coming up is it's about collateral and negligence. Like nature, for example, is not collateral to what we want to do, and it's about casual negligence and showing that this is not supposed to be this. This is a living ecosystem. It's living in its own way. Even if you're talking about maybe the quarry system, just rocks, it could also be considered as a living system. It cannot be collateral in any of the ambitions that we want to do. Being ambitious is not wrong. Collateral is something that we need to take. Right. So for me, the you would be ambition, and the safeguarding would be the everything that goes as collateral.
Very, very important.
Yeah, can we just pass?
As coming back to your questions, as in what the key message of the three documentaries were, I think it is about mutual existence, coexistence, and it's not a us versus them narrative. And when we say us versus them, us I'm referring to humans, and them I'm referring to all the other biodiversity on Earth. I feel like all the problems initiate from that kind of mentality, that we think about development and 10 years later we realize that it's destruction, and initially we think that it's just harming others and we are developing ourselves, but then later when the repercussions strike, that time we realize that oh no, it's also us who are suffering because we are living together and we are also interdependent. So I feel like it also comes from as a previous speaker mentioned, ignorance of the situation, ignorance of our environment. For example, the last documentary about RA, where the tribals were being relocated to slum rehabilitation areas. I feel like that very fact that they were being rehabilitated when they don't want to, they are happy in their lives, they are self-sufficient, but that idea of the powerful or the economically privileged class of the society to think that oh, their life is not better, or using that as an excuse to build more in an area which is full of biodiversity. And I feel like today when we look at all the developed cities around, there are so many buildings and we have had so much biodiversity loss, yet now we are realizing there's so much pollution, there's so many health issues coming up. Our life, the duration of human life is decreasing because of this. We are questioning the existence of our future generations and many more. So I think that would be my take on this.
In the last documentary, there was one lady who went to jail. So my question is that, like, why did she go to the jail? Like, why did she? Why was she?
Very good question.
Very good question. Very important question.
I just had one question to ask. So we've seen all this, and this is the subject for us. We are learning climate crisis as the subject that Vicky sir is taking along with Matt sir. So one question that I have is, what do you suggest as students of media, as people residing in an urban space? What do you think are the most prominent actionable steps that we can take as students, as individuals, as people residing in this community? What do you suggest that we do so that there is some contribution that makes an impact? Maybe not even impact. What are ways in which we can help? What are the actionable steps?
Sure.
Because seeing everything, I feel like at the end of the day puts us in a I don't know how to. I can't find the right words, but helpless comes to my mind.
But that is not the case. We are very much powerful. We have the voice. But if you could guide us in the right direction, where to look, what to actually do, that would be amazing. Thank you.
I think sure. So, the reason I'm still dwelling on this question of who is the you and who comprises this, the humans that we're talking about, and what is the collateral that you were referring to. So I think the issue is, the problem is not one that requires expertise. The problem is one that requires a complete understanding of the nature of interdependencies that exist between human inhabitation and force a lot of lobbies in that space, right? When we say humans, one has to look at each of these films. Who's the actor group that's missing in this explicitly? They're not there as part of the interviewees, but the looming presence is of developers, it's of the construction industry, it's air conditioners that you see in the first film. There are these constant images that are coming to us very, very silently. They're really glaring at us. And I think what's necessary is to make sure that we understand the stakes. When you're saying, what can we do? I don't have any answers. There's no silver bullet to this problem. And I think, like Mr. Praveen Bhargav in the previous session mentioned, that damage is happening in small incremental ways. Even the Correas of Bengaluru are getting eroded in such minuscule ways. Sometimes you see very large construction overlays and tanks in the city, but otherwise you see violations on the edges of these carries in very incremental ways. You don't even realize that the carry is actually disappearing. And then, as a planner, I can say that the Land Revenue Department has a certain responsibility. The Municipal Corporation has a certain responsibility. The BDA, Bangalore Development Authority, has other responsibilities. There's some 11 agencies which are responsible for taking care of the carry, and none of them has the full custodianship of the carry. So there's complete ambiguity and ambivalence about who is accountable to protect the carries of the city and the watersheds that are, providing water and the water resources to enter these carries. There is no clear custodianship of any of our carries from an organizational responsibilities point of view. And there is complicity or hand-in-hand nexus that exists between builders, construction industry players, bureaucrats, politicians, and we hear about these. Sometimes you hear about them in newspaper articles. So my first question when I watch these films is, to what extent are these films going to impact the ambitions of these lobbies? How do we communicate to these lobbies in a way that will provide a hard-hitting message, exactly what you said, that is going to affect all of us. In the end, we will all die. But that's not the mentality at the moment, right? At the moment, we're not looking at development as a space which involves heterogeneous stakes that are adversely impacting some groups more significantly than others. And of course, the wealthier groups are privileged and they will probably suffer much later in the time horizons. So the tough question is how to impact the lobbies in a way not to just say we don't want you to meet your ambitions, because that's not going to work. How do we then strike a conversation across all active groups to make sure that there are some active groups who would compromise on their ambitions in the interest of public good, in the interest of the environment? And that's a skill set that we all need to learn, I think, regardless of whether we are. That's not a skill set that belongs to the realm of an expert like me. I'm an urban planner. I'm an expert in my domain. But I need to go beyond my expertise, because my expertise is only going to limit me further. I need to go beyond it and be able to sit across the table with groups that are at loggerheads with each other, and see how your films in the future can actually help build those negotiations, and not just negotiations, but really hard-hitting, compromises that some groups would have to make to in the public interest, in overall public good, in the cause of the environment, etc. And that's not an easy task. I'm not trained to mediate, but I think mediation and arriving at compromises in the larger public good is the most crucial way forward. It's not just participation. And all kinds of struggles would be involved in that space, I think, including activism to gentle negotiations. Multiple skill sets need to come together.
So there are a lot of cats eating up the bulbul eggs from many places,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So this brings me to a very interesting conversation I remember having many years ago with my boss then at SPJ, who was also involved. We were trying to bring out our journal, which is talking about education for the underprivileged. And so, like I wanted to say thanks the child who we still haven't answered his question. The cat eating the bulbul eggs. That's happening everywhere, especially in urban planning. I may be sharing something which may be quite contrarian to popular view of doing good social service, giving back to society. But when we talk about migration, I am a Bombay girl and I feel very strongly for my city, and it is breaking down. You're from Bombay, you know what the city is. It's breaking down every foot you keep. The next step you take, it's a massive breakdown of the city. So you will find a lot of, ladies and other volunteers teaching these supposedly, when they're migrant people who've lost the glory of their lives in the city life now, and their kids who are being taught on the footpaths. There is food being provided for by donation, Khana khana jo bach gaya wo de dijiye Robin Hood Army. While all these aspects are really good in their own, but what we don't realize is that we are providing for an ecosystem here for the migrants in which they thrive because somebody wants to employ these people in their karkhana, in their dukan, in their ghar ka kaam, and etc. etc. But who is paying or taking that brunt? Was my city built to take so many migrants in one season every day? Are we enabling a lower quality of life for all of us? There are so many questions, and then from the footpath they will enter the jhuggi jhopdi, which they'll set up. I've seen jhuggi jhopdis come alive in 6 months, and this is how it starts. Footpath se sadak se jhuggi, jhuggi se one side. It goes into many years like that, and then it goes into slum redevelopment, and that is where the lobbies kick in. So, yeah, we have many cats, many bulbulans.
I just want to respond as somebody from Bombay who's a migrant to this city. And then why I don't see anybody asking this question to me, because probably I'm from a class that is expected. I pay rent, right? And I, like many others who may be forced to live in jhuggi jhopdis, right? I'm sure they're not choosing to be there. That probably brings us to a question of why are they having to come to cities?
Exactly, that's why I said it's a contrary
And
view that I'm stating.
Yeah.
But it's a question I want to really ask.
I think it's a question that all of us need to ask ourselves. And somewhere then I would like to, also probably it would answer to your question that what can we do? Maybe a reimagination is probably needed of what kind of a world, what kind of systems we want.
I think where they're migrating from also really needs to be looked into, and that is where the focus needs to be a lot of
Correct.
a lot of
What kind of
stated
development, what kind of opportunities are available.
because there is also migration of city folks also happening into rural parts of India. That's also very, it's happening. The numbers are small, but it is happening. So I think a neglect maybe is also a very important part of which needs to be
I think
addressed.
you could probably speak more to, the current systems, the way urbanization is happening and the current systems where everything around a city is thought of as resources for the city, right? And you could probably speak to that. And also, the image of another question I wanted to then, ask you, which again adds to your thing, is about resource distribution and access and rights. So,
Right. So, in urban planning, our urban planning legislation, the laws that lay out what are the components and contents of urban planning, urban plans, the master plans that we prepare for our cities, is very limited. In the Karnataka Town and Country Planning Act, for example, there is no mention of environmental protection. So maybe your films need to bring out some of these glaring gaps that exist by engaging with some of these, by engaging with the knobs. It's easier to engage with communities, but it's not as easy to knock at the doors of private companies, knock at the doors of the government and get them to speak and engage with you in a film. So I would say the effort would be to bring about greater awareness about how limited our planning processes are, how limited and siloed our urbanization processes are. The plans that we make don't recognize the right to the city. For example, like you were asking, Mansi, the right to the city is the right to live in a city for all groups, whether they are from all segments of the society and all segments of various economic classes that our cities comprise, right? So it's important then to bring about the awareness that the questions about the right to the city is not explicitly embedded in any of our plans. Our plans are just spatial plans which allow for, which allocate land and resources for further expansion. It's a very mathematical sort of exercise that we do in urban planning. In urban planning, you say, today we have a population of so many million people. In 10 years, the population will grow double. How do we accommodate all of this doubling of the population in our city? So you keep opening up more land for urbanization. And what do you see in a city like Bangalore? Many of our carriers have got constructed upon. We are sprawling outward and outward. It's a city that's sprawling concentrically outward with no resources available on the peri-urban areas. A lot of the peri-urban areas have got large mixed-use developments, mainly IT campuses combined with affluent or even middle-class apartment complexes. Most of these are consuming water, for example, through groundwater resources. There's severe extraction of groundwater. There's all kinds of complex arrangements. I won't get into that. But the questions that we need to ask is, what is this process of urbanization? Who is responsible for it from the side of the government? Is there any one agency? What are the political accountabilities that currently our laws provide for in terms of shaping our cities in more sustainable ways, shaping the future growth of our cities in more sustainable ways? And I would encourage you all as filmmakers to then penetrate deeper into understanding these, foundational gaps that exist in the governance of our cities, for example. We don't have a political agent. We don't have the state level ministers who are accountable to our city. Similarly, we don't have a mayor in the city who's elected by all of us directly. So who is the custodian of our city? Who can we point fingers and say, so this entire group of ministers haven't done their job in responding to the needs of the people? So I would encourage all of you to actually, while making your films, spend that extra time in reading a lot about some pressing issues, fundamental issues that remain unresolved in our cities. So you can bring out all of those questions as part of your films as well. And there's a lot of awareness building that needs to be done, not just awareness building as fleeting activities, but really in-depth, involve yourselves in, jump into the battlefield. That's the only way to deal with it. And it's not just visual communication, but it's actually engaging with the problem.
So I just have a question, something to do with the film a little bit, and something to do with some personal experiences. I spent a few years working with the Adivasi communities in fantastic years, fantastic learning, more learned than anything given back. So from that perspective, even when I forget the name of that researcher who was working with the community in RA, was talking about how much there is for us to learn from them, rather than us trying to inculcate whatever we're doing here and just going horribly wrong. And of course, we do have our aspirations, right? We need a metro, we need to declog roads, all of those things. But how much of that can learn from traditional ecological knowledge, and how much of that is happening now, how much of that can happen, and what are the channels for that? It's just something I'm curious about within the urban planning space.
The urban planning space, in a formal point of view, from a formal procedural point of view, makes no explicit, spaces for this sort of a learning to take place. But having said that, there's no legal provision, is what I'm referring to. There's no legal provision for participation or deeper partnerships, etc. But there's a lot of civic action bottom up, in that space, there's no limits to one's imagination. I think there can be as many spaces that can actually emerge depending on the local context. But from a planning point of view, it depends on the. It's unfortunately not as systemic, like you were saying. Do we have systems in place to enable this? No, we don't have any systems in place. But that's a struggle again. I will go back to the question that this lady asked. What do we do? What is our role? Your role is to drive the importance and the message across to governments, to private sector companies, particularly these two stakeholders, to then, and also buyers, I would say buyers of apartments, etc., that are getting constructed on the fringes of our lakes and tanks and forests, to actually question themselves. And it's a tough story building here. It's a very tough story building here to actually communicate to them on how their profit-making ambitions will cause them detriment, not so much in the long term, but in the short term. You need to think about their future trajectories and construct stories to tell them why the absence of a participatory engagement will cause everyone, even their profits to suffer. That's the message to them. It's not an easy one. I'm also struggling with it. Many of us are struggling with it.